Good evening again from New York. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations CWS Journeys. Thank you for tuning in. The lovely lady next to me is Miss Nicole deWeever. Nicole, good evening and welcome to CWS Journeys.
Good evening and thank you for having me.
Let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, I must say I'm from St Maarten, as you've mentioned. I come from the Dutch side of St Maarten. I am, as you said, I am the cultural ambassador of my country, St Maarten, Island St Maarten. And I came here at the very young age of 14 years old to go to school in the US. And my journey from coming from the Caribbean coming from St. Maarten in the Caribbean to the US was quite a culture shock. But I found my way, and I was supported, of course, by family, which I know for you Caribbean listeners out there, you know how important the family is. And coming from the Caribbean, dealing with the different challenges, whether it's culture, the climate, and everything else. Then attending college and university in New York City, and then working professionally as a performer. And now currently not only a performer, but also the founder of a foundation.
If you were not doing what you're doing today, what career would you like to have tried?
You know, for a very long time, have always been interested in the elderly. I love old people. I love having conversations with old people. I gravitate towards them, and I told my mom for a very long time I would love to work with the elderly, specifically with the White and Yellow Cross. And so it was very funny. I had a period where I really wanted to pursue working with the elderly. Mm-hmm. And my mom said something to me very funny. She said, "Do you know you have to change them? And you know, it's not only about having conversations with them, you know, you got to really know what you're doing, and you got to really take care of them in certain ways." And I, you know, not like she distracted me or turned me off from doing it, but I really, from a young age, found my love in dancing and in the arts. So at a certain point, I know I had to honor that goal. But if I didn't see myself being an artist, it would be to work with the White and Yellow Cross.
You know, that you mentioned art and dance, I want to ask you this. When did your art journey begin, and when did dance and singing enter the picture?
You know, I've always been dancing. I always say from out of the womb. From the age of 4, I started dancing with a company. It was called Creative Dance at that point. I was 4. It was called the Rhinefield Ballet in St. Maarten. And from small, I've always been singing and dancing. I was very active as a singer also in elementary school and in high school in the US. I was a part of the show choir in high school. So I always dance and sing. It was something that I also did at home as a pastime, as a hobby. And I was always around it, you know.
So tell us, what was life like growing up in St. Maarten at ages 9 and 15?
Wow. I was very involved in a lot of activity. I basically lived at a dance school. I love the ocean, so I was always a part of doing like water sports. Very active as a teenager, and I used to go fishing a lot with my dad.
Wow.
So I was always on a boat, you know.
What was your fondest memory of him, your dad?
Going fishing. We used to go fishing every Saturday morning.
And your mom?
My mom, it would be our car drives home. My mom always used to sing hymns in the car on our way home. From a long day at work, she would pick me up at my grandmother's house in the capital, Phillipsburg. And we would drive home while we were singing her hymns that she loved. So that's in another way, you know, my love and my desire for singing probably stemmed from her, from a very young age, listening to her and also trying to emulate what she did with her voice.
You mentioned your grandmother. Did she have an impact? Was she one of the women that had an impact on you?
My grandmother was called Mother Gat. She was like the mother to all. Mm-hmm. So everyone called her mother. Yeah, so she was a very special lady, definitely very active in the community. She was the kind of person that fed almost everybody in her community at some point in her life.
Was she a storyteller too?
I wouldn't say she was a storyteller, but she definitely was a person that cared deeply for people, very compassionate, and she would give you her last, you know. So people knew her as that person in the community.
So, who were some other women that you admire and respect when you were growing up?
Wow. I would say my grandmother. She serves as my biggest inspiration. She serves as someone that has come from a little to nothing and was able to create the impossible with the little that she had, you know?
One of the things I like about growing up in Guyana and the Caribbean, there's this thing about older folks, the elderly, telling us, using these proverbs and adages, these to guide us, to teach us things. Is there a favorite quote or a favorite saying that either your mother or your grandmother used or said to you that still resonates with you?
Wow. You know what? She wasn't much of a talkative person, to be quite honest with you. But I can't, none comes to mind right now.
Okay.
But I just watching her as she, as I said to you, she was very compassionate and very giving. Just to watch how she would take care of people. Like, I felt like that was almost her purpose, her role, to take care of everyone, you know.
When you think of dance, what comes to mind?
When I think of dance, what comes to mind? I think I've said this to you before, but it's like the one expression where you don't even have to say a single word and you can tell a story with it, you know? And for a very long time, I had been very introverted, didn't like to speak up, was not the person in class that would raise my finger to say something. I was very introverted. Dance served as a medium or space for me where I felt like I could be as loud as I wanted to without saying a single word, you know?
Fred and Adele Astaire Award 2010, Best Female Dancer of Broadway. Gosh, how did that award speak to you, and what did it tell you about your work?
Wow. Well, when I got nominated, it was very interesting because I was featured outside of the ensemble as a nominee. Because usually that award is given to the ensemble. I was blown away because of the people that I was nominated with. They were like veterans of Broadway, and it was my debut on Broadway. And I actually went to the show unprepared to give a speech if I won, because I just did not feel like I would have the chance. So I was totally blown away by the fact that I got the award, and was, as I said before, I just felt like, wow, I am just honored to just be amongst the people that are nominated, you know? So it was humbling and extremely one of the highlights of my experiences on Broadway.
Odelco Awards, Black Film Festival, Dance Africa, West Side Story, Failure off and on Broadway, Failure World Tour. To name some. Which of these would you say was most challenging for you?
Wow. Well, you didn't mention it, but I work with Miss Catherine Dunham, and she is, the pioneer of black. She is, the pioneer of black dance in America. And it was my first job to work through the American Library of Congress to preserve black dance in America. So I was one of 10 dancers that was selected. And working with her was, it was extremely exceptional, because I read about her in my dance composition and theory books at NYU. And then to have the first opportunity as a dancer, non-American, coming to the US and being able to be documented in the American Library of Congress, dancing for Miss Dunham was incredible. And so to date, it has been, in terms of a professional job, the most, I would say, challenging yet incredible experience I've ever had, because she was at that point still alive, and it was like working with a legend,
What did you learn about yourself after that experience?
Well, it was the first time I did anything on film on that professional level, and I realized so much about myself, because I would obviously, as a dancer, you dance, but you don't get the audience that close to your face. But when you're working with film, it picks up all of the little isms and the little characteristics that you may have, even your insecurities. And I remember the director coming to me and say, relax. And I thought I was relaxed, but I guess my expression in my face was indicating that I wasn't. You know, it kind of tapped into just the little details, the little meticulous things that you don't think about, such as how your eyes are, you know, what your mouth's doing, you know. And so he came up to me and he said, just relax, you know, don't worry about the cameras, you know. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, it's incredible how those experiences kind of shape you and mold you and also stretch you in a sense, you know.
Do you ever get nervous before a dance? I mean, like now?
I'm nervous
After-
now.
You what?
I always get nervous, especially if it's something that I care deeply about. I mean, I think as an artist anyways, if you're passionate about what you do and you're trying to convey some type of message, because you care about it so deeply, it's only natural that you will be nervous about what you're doing.
How would you say you have grown as a dancer the last 10 years?
I'm definitely a wiser mover. As you age, you understand the body moves differently, and it definitely you face challenges with your body because of age, you know, whether it's injury or just your body just changes, you know.
I've always been curious about this, and someone who dances, I remember I asked them this question after each performance. Do you learn something new? What is that? Is every performance exactly the same?
Never.
What do you strive for in each performance?
Wow, to move the audience, you know. It's not always about the audience. It's for me more of a shared experience, but for anyone that is there to witness my performance or the performance, it's being able to move them, to say something about what I'm doing, to have that connection with someone watching, so that they're moved by the performance, you know.
You know, when I the first time I saw you on stage, perhaps the only time, was when I watched you on Fela.
Yes.
And what came to mind were words like agility, fluidity, flexibility. You know, it's like here is someone conducting a symphony with their body.
Wow.
And I was really enthralled, glued, and I'm sure most of us in the audience were. So I want to ask you this. When the music begins, and before you make that first step, or after making the first step, who are you then? Are you transformed? Are you the same Nicole that is sitting opposite me?
Not at all. You know, it was interesting because the movement and the aesthetic of the movement and what my character called for was the opposite to who I am as a person, I believe. I mean, of course, you tap into some part of you to deliver that performance, but I would love to say it becomes kind of like my alter ego, you know? But that moment before I go out on stage is a very important moment because, like with everything I do in life where there's an end goal, which is to obviously survive the show and not be taken out on a stretcher because it was a very hard show. But it's to also see the end and to be committed in every moment. As if every moment, if someone wants to take a picture, that still shot can convey some type of message. So for me, like the first few moments before the last song, which usually would be Gentleman, that would be the interlude to start the whole set where all the queens would enter on stage. I always look up and I look down and then I take a deep breath and then I'm out, you know. And as soon as the light hits my face, I'm just praying that I can stay on stage and stay in one piece, because it was like, you know, we were dancing for blood out there every night, you know.
How long have you been with Fela?
I was there from the beginning, you know. I was a part of the creative process, which they now call labs, but back then they would call it a workshop. So basically you come into the process where you're trying to, the director, the choreographer, the whole creative team is trying to find what this show is, you know, and it's kind of like coming in on a blank canvas and they're trying to create it around a cast that exists. So it's an honor to be a part of an original production.
You've been to the off Broadway, the on Broadway, and you've traveled with Fela.
Yes.
And this might be unfair to ask you this, but I'm curious. What was one of your most memorable nights dancing? Because you go out there every night and you really give your all.
Yes.
But describe a night when you would consider there was a fusion of spirituality and physicality, and it really impacted you?
There was 2 nights. One night specifically was when my parents were in the audience, because I left home at 14 years old, and my parents had not seen me perform from since I was a little girl. And so the first performance they saw was my performance on Broadway, premiere night. So that was very special for me. My dad was there, my mom was there, and then there was like a delegation of 60 people from St Maarten, some which I did not even know, that attended. So that was very special, because when I walked on stage, it was not only about me being able to accomplish me being able to be on Broadway, but it was also about what my family had to do for me to get to this point in my life. So it was very meaningful, you know. And then the second very important part of being in a production like that, and what meant so much to me, was being able to perform in front of Fela's family, his children, you know. We were able to perform in front of Femi, Shayun, as well as Kunle, and his daughter, Yenny. And that was very powerful, because we were not telling a story that was made up or make-believe, but we was telling a story and hoping to honor their father's legacy and life. And it was interesting to see their response to it. And we were praying and hoping that it would be impactful, and that it would be great enough of a justice to him as a person and what he stood for. And to see their emotion after the show was incredible as an artist, that we took them to the point of tears, you know, because we were telling their story.
How has Fela changed you?
You know, that show was really important for me as an individual, because it taught me something about the human spirit, number one. And that sometimes even when you stand alone on a mission, or you feel like what you're doing is larger than yourself, and it's not only about you and you're impacting the lives of many, you may feel loneliness, and that it's okay, because even though in the midst of all of it that you're trying to accomplish, that there's people either ahead of you or behind you constantly that are moved by the work that you're doing. For me, it ignited the warrior spirit in me, and also the leader within me, because it made me feel like my purpose for being here was more than about myself. And so I really have to say thank you to that journey and that experience, because it's almost like I tapped into the Fela within me. I wanted to create a movement of my own.
That warrior that
Yes.
was evoked, how do you channel it today?
Well, you know, I have an organization called Art Saves Lives, and I believe it literally does. I have seen it work in
Tell
many
us-
ways.
Tell us about Art Saves Lives.
Well, Art Saves Lives is a cross-cultural exchange between youth in need as well as aspiring artists who seek to use their talent for positive change. And I believe in using art for social change. And so, as Fela had done that with his movement in music, I want to do that with the power I know that art has to change lives. So it's really important for me, especially coming from the Caribbean, where most people kind of discourage their kids from pursuing the arts. And you go into conversations where people may not have the value that they should have for the arts, because most of the time they question it, because they think that there's no way to be able to sustain or be able to financially have a career in it. So they don't encourage young people to pursue it. But really and truly educated in my community how to value it, and to value it to the point where it's understood that it is the most fundamental thing. It should be encouraged for every human being to be artistic in some way, because it is important as a human being to have it in your life. Even if you don't want to pursue it as a career, that it is therapeutic, it is healing.
And children,
Yes.
what made you want to get involved with teaching children, and why
Well, you know,
that population?
I left at 14, and if it wasn't for parents that could afford for me to leave my country, and having a support system that encouraged me,